Huth, and I teach writing for Well-Trained Mind Academy. My specialty as a writer is in creative writing, especially fiction. I've published stories and essays, and before joining the Well-Trained Mind Academy team, I spent 20 years teaching academic and creative writing to college students. I love teaching writing because writing classes are about relationships and making connections with readers, with other students, and even with our own ways of thinking. So for me, the foundation of a successful writing class is the community. So in class, we exchange ideas, we think, we listen, and we teach each other. Another crucial part of learning how to write is learning that it's okay to make mistakes. It's okay and it's inevitable. So we work with that process. I give my students lots of feedback on their assignments about how they can improve and about what their strengths are, so they can build on those skills and grow from there. During my course sessions, I try to make learning interactive and engaging. We frequently do exercises in class and practice the concepts that they're learning in a safe way where the stakes are low. The goal for my class is for students to learn a wide variety of writing strategies and to gain confidence about their own ability, to know when and how to use those strategies. Next, you will see a sample of one of my class sessions. This partial lesson is for Expository Writing 1, and it teaches how to write description that creates a certain impression of your subject, referred to as slant. By this point in the school year, we've already learned about description, especially how to use concrete details that appeal to the senses. Based on this lesson, students will be able to create a description that accomplishes their goal as a writer by portraying a subject positively, negatively, or neutrally. Hi everybody, and welcome to week 14 of Expository Writing 1. What we'll do today is community building, as usual. Then we'll practice outlining the description of a person, and then we'll learn and practice creating slant in description, which I will explain what that means. Now for this sample lesson, we're only going to do this third part. So description can be written to give a certain impression of your subject, positive, neutral, or negative. When you're doing this as a writer, giving your description a positive, neutral, or negative impression, that's called slant. So I like to think of it as this little giraffe here. This is neutral. The giraffe is just standing there simply upright. But if you tilt it in one direction or the other direction, change it a little bit, that's the slant. So in other words, when you're writing a slant, you're not lying or changing the meaning, but instead you're creating an opinion or an impression from your point of view about the subject in terms of what you want your readers to think. So think about the description we read of Scrooge a few weeks ago. Take a look at this and review what it says, and then try to identify, does this give a negative, a positive, or a neutral impression of Scrooge? At this point, I give the students a couple of minutes to read through it and then answer in the chat what they think it is. So, right, as most of you guessed, this is a negative impression of Scrooge. It's portraying him as a very unfriendly and unpleasant person to be around. Now, as writers, the question we're really asking is, what words or details create that impression? So as a writer, that's what you have to think about, is what words can I use to create the negative, positive, or neutral slant that I want? So go ahead and use the whiteboard to circle or underline any words here that the writer is using that you think create that negative impression. And then I give them a couple of minutes to get onto the whiteboard and mark the words that they think creates a negative impression. So these are the words that I found that create a negative impression, and usually the students find these words as well. On the other hand, this description of Bruegel that we looked at earlier is mostly, I would say, neutral or maybe slightly positive. Once, when commissioned during the winter to paint a series of spring flowers, Bruegel delayed beginning the work simply so that he could paint the flowers from life. Okay. But as writers, one of the things that makes writing powerful is that we could change this to have a negative connotation, a negative slant, if we wanted to, by changing some of the words. So, for example, the word delayed is essentially neutral, but what could we change it to that would create then a negative impression? And I let the students guess some words. So one that I came up with is procrastinated. So it's not really essentially changing the meaning, but it is creating a negative slant. Dawdled is another word that would do the same thing. Here's another example of a sentence about, two sentences about Bruegel that's mostly neutral or positive. His touch is delicate, his figures are correct. His flower paintings are similarly detailed with careful attention to the exact color and construction of each bloom. Same thing, so this is basically neutral or maybe slightly positive, but if we change some of the words, we can change the slant to negative. So delicate, what's a word that we could replace delicate with that means essentially the same thing but has a negative connotation? And I let them guess. So fussy is a word that I came up with here. It kind of has the similar meaning, but it's got a negative connotation. Correct is another word we could change. Can you think of any words that we could change correct to that would mean the same thing but would have a negative connotation? And then I let them in the chat. They usually guess a few of the correct words. So one thing I came up with is maybe to change that to unimaginative. Or how about detailed? His flower paintings are similarly detailed, which sounds positive or possibly neutral. Could we change that word to something that means essentially the same thing but has a negative slant? And then I let them guess a few words. Finicky is one that I came up with. And this the word careful here. So he pays careful attention to the exact color and construction. So that sounds pretty positive, right? You want artists to be careful. You want people to be careful generally instead of careless. But what could we change it to that has a similar meaning? So we don't want to change the essential meaning, but we want to make it have a negative slant. And then I give the students a chance to see what they can come up with. Obsessive is a possible answer that I came up with of a way we could say the same thing but change it to have a negative slant. So what I want you to do now is to work in breakout groups, which I will create in a minute, and take these 3 sentences and change the slant for these descriptions by changing the underlined words. So read through each sentence, determine whether or not you think it's a positive, negative, or neutral slant, and then change it so that it has a different slant. And then we'll come back together and I'll see what you came up with. Then I give them a few minutes to do that breakout group, and then we go over it together as a class. And then I always end class by talking about what they should do to be prepared for the next class. So for the next class, what you should do is read the pattern in your book of description of a person on page 215, which sort of explains the process that you want to use when writing a description of a person, which is your assignment for this week. And then you should also read the instructions for this week's assignment, which is a description of a person with a slant. So make sure you read both of those before you come back to our next class, and I look forward to working with you again then. Bye.